Hello, gorgeous. Welcome to HG Radio, everything beauty, cancer, and inspiration. Here is your co-founder and host, Kim Becker.
Hello, gorgeous, and thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Kim Becker, and this is Hello, Gorgeous, everything beauty, cancer, and inspiration on Society Bites Radio, social interaction for the mind and soul. This episode is brought to you by Amplified Marketing Group. They specialize in affordable mobile solutions that will get you noticed and help you retain customers. Check them out at www.amplified.marketing. Our guest today is Mary Jo Sartorius. Mary Jo was engaged to be remarried. Life was proceeding according to her plan. She'd achieved the goal of being named the Director of Special Education and was getting close to completing her PhD. Then she was diagnosed with a rare cancer of the nasal septum. Faced with the total removal of her nose, she can say nearly 14 years later, though cancer was not on her agenda, but she is blessed to have had that experience. Hi, Mary Jo, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Kim. Thanks for having me.
Well, I am so excited. I've had the opportunity to meet you in person through an event we did together, the Calendar Girls. And I remember when I met you and heard your story, I thought, I need to have you on our podcast because your story is so inspirational that I feel that you have the opportunity to inspire others.
Aw, thank you.
So I'm really excited that you said yes and that you're willing to share your story. So thank you. So I know a little bit about your childhood in previous conversations that we've had, but I think it lends a lot to your story. So can you share a little bit about your childhood with us?
Sure. And I think it does. It does contribute to my story. So I was adopted when I was 4 months old. I have two siblings who are also adopted. My adopted mother died of cancer when I was 8. And on the morning that she died, my brother and I went out to play, and one of the neighborhood kids said, "What does it feel like to not have a mom?" And at that point, I had this, I can remember it, this overwhelming feeling that all of a sudden I'm different. I'm different than everybody else. My adopted father remarried, and then about 6 months after he remarried, he died of a massive heart attack, and I was 12. In the same time period, I lost a cousin who was also the same age as me when we were 16, and very unexpectedly, and my grandpa. And during all this time, there were remarriages, so I was never alone. I ended up with my 3 adopted siblings and then 5 step-siblings. It was kind of like the Brady Bunch, if any of you were young enough or old enough to remember back then, that television show. But back in those days, people didn't talk much about things that were messy, like death and cancer. There weren't support groups for kids. I was desperately focused on making my whole life look normal. And when I went to college, it was really a relief because nobody knew me there. And so I could have this perfect family because I had a family unit. It just didn't involve all the loss. And I guess that I spent a lot of time in most of my young adulthood trying to not let people see any of that vulnerability that comes with when you have traumatic experiences. They call them adverse childhood experiences, that they can have a negative lifelong impact. But the question for me, and that relates to the cancer, is that every single one of my siblings were what people would deem be successful. None of them are addicted. They're all employed. We have everything from a neurosurgeon to a manufacturing business owner to engineer. And why is it that all 8 of us became normal or successful? And that's a question that I ponder, and I'll address that later maybe.
Well, it's interesting because losing my husband, and we lost him just about the time that my son was getting ready to enter high school. And I really tried to make a life lesson out of that experience, that life is truly 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. And I really impress on Seth, look, you have a choice here. you can either stay in bed and pull the covers over your head, and nobody would blame you because he and his dad were best friends. But you choose, you have a choice, and your choices were to honor your dad by going out and living your best life and continuing to do, like I always feel like he put the road work for us so that we could he set us up for success basically. And so I really try and tell Seth that. So it's kind of, I feel like what you did too. You didn't allow your circumstances to define you. Do you agree?
Yes. And I will tell you that those circumstances, whether it's and the impact of an adverse childhood experience, or when you're older, the trauma, any of those things can cause a life of PTSD and all the dysfunctions that come with that. And I think the one thing that's consistent that I have learned and read about and in my job, seen kids and families for decades, is that there are things that you have in your life that help you be able to navigate those things, the adverse effects, like what you did with your son. A strong family unit, people that you can trust wrapped around you are two of those things. Life resuming as normal as you can make it. Those talking about it, those are things that are factors that when they're wrapped around kids, they're much more likely to have successful adult lives. And now we have so many services to help kids that have experienced a loss like that weren't available then. Like I said, back in the 60s, nobody talked about it. And I sometimes I think that's okay. And sometimes I think I'm a big supporter of all of the services for people, kids and adults who experience any kind of trauma.
I agree.
So, yeah.
I agree. So your life is going along according to plan when you received your cancer diagnosis. So I'm really interested, like what kind of symptoms were you having and how was your cancer diagnosed?
Well, it's interesting. I had I was very lucky. I was 49 years old. I had never had a cavity, and I really, to this day, don't think I've ever had the flu. And so I really was experiencing really good health. And one morning, I woke up with a dull ache inside my nose. It felt like I'd run into a door. And I said, "Don't you think I'd remember if I ran into a door what caused that dull ache inside my nose?" It lasted for several months, and after it didn't get worse, it didn't get better, it just was always there. I made an appointment to see an ENT, and it's kind of a long story because it took a year, but it was two ENTs basically telling me there was nothing wrong with me. Anything from I had a deviated septum, which I really didn't, or a bone spur, or chronic sinusitis, a misread CAT scan, and in August, so it had been almost a year, 10 months. Just during a routine dental visit, my dentist said to me, "If nobody's biopsied that," I just was talking to him about how my nose hurt. And he didn't see anything. He just said, "I think you should get another opinion." And so the third ENT I went to did a biopsy. By this time I was getting worried. I asked him, "Do you think this could be something serious like cancer?" And he said, "I don't think so." He was kind of funny. He said, I could get hit by a meteorite by sitting in this chair. We won't know till we have actually biopsied it." And it turned out September 19th, almost, we're at 11 months now. I called the doctor. He said he was sitting there looking at my test results, getting ready to call me. He was stunned. He'd actually called and had the lab redo the results, and that it was squamous cell carcinoma on my nasal septum. And I guess my learning curve for that is I had this uneasy feeling for those 11 months that there was something wrong, and I had been brought up so much to respect the doctors and not to question. Even though I'm a pretty strong talkative advocate in other areas of my life, but what I know now is that there was a misread CT that my lack of advocacy for myself and asking questions and seeking still yet a third opinion really did cost me my nose, because they could go back later and see it was a stage 2 when the CT scan was done that was misread. And so advocacy, and you know your body better than anybody else. Medicine is not an exact science, and we want it to be. But in my case, it was costly in many ways.
Wow. Wow. And I agree. I think that being an advocate for yourself and just, I think we've just all, I've grown up, you just trust the doctor, whatever he tells you. But my late husband would always say they call it practicing medicine for a reason.
Yeah.
So tell us more about like this. Is this carcinoma, is it a rare type of cancer? And
Yeah.
like, what are the, like, is there a 1 in 1 millionth chance of a person getting this? Like, how common is this type of cancer?
I don't know about that. I know that it represents about 1% of all the cancers diagnosed annually, and that when I was treated, that the only place that they could treat me was Indianapolis, and in Indiana anyway. And the surgeons that I met with said they usually see maybe 10 cases a year in Indiana. I do know that and they're the premier place in the Midwest to go. And that I was 20 years younger than the youngest person they had treated with it. It's mostly men in their 80s, chain smoking, alcoholics, and me. So I didn't fit any. I didn't fit the profile, which is probably why people minimized it. But when you Google it, it's pretty horrifying. The pictures that you see, people without noses, and that's, the good and the bad of Google is that we Googled it, and it was horrifying to see before I even got started.
So how did they treat this type of cancer?
So I was given a choice. I have to say that my doctors, the surgeons, the whole medical team, they were fabulous. The day I was diagnosed, the surgeon called me from his son's soccer game that night. It was just a couple hours after I had heard the news. And I thought to myself then, wow, the surgeon that calls you from their child's soccer field, that's pretty cool. I still didn't really understand the gravity of my situation. And he said, we have a multidisciplinary team. It's meeting tomorrow, and we'd like you to come. We're trying to rearrange a patient to get you there. And I still wasn't completely understanding the gravity of the situation until towards the end of the conversation, he said, the most challenging thing we have with this is cosmetic, at which point I drove my car off the road and kind of I couldn't even ask, what do you mean by cosmetic? Because up until that moment, I was turning 50 in 6 months, and I had planned on staying ahead of the aging game and having my first chemical peel, and really taking the decade of being 50, embracing it. And then, so after doing many scans, I was down with their multidisciplinary team, and I think it's because of my age, they gave me a choice. They told me that the most curative approach is total removal of your nose, because it's a stage 4, and it's a very aggressive cancer. But in my case, what they were willing to do is say that if once I go into surgery, if they felt like they could get most of it through surgery and finish the rest with radiation, that they would do that, knowing that the radiation would cause my wrinkles and pigment changes and possibly a secondary cancer. I remember just kind of sitting in the corner, my brother, the surgeon, he's a neurosurgeon, and my soon-to-be husband, and I said, what's my other option? And they said, that's it. So I picked to have only it partially removed and go through the radiation. And so the radiation involved me having to go to Indianapolis, which is 3 hours away, every day for about 4 months, because it was a highly specialized kind of radiation. And I will say that I'm very lucky because they radiated my face, my nose. I didn't lose my teeth, that I was at risk for losing all my teeth, and I didn't develop cataracts. They had me follow up with my dentist, who did a lot of I had special toothpaste, saw me for 3 months, for years after this all went down. And so then we waited for 2 years to make sure it had not returned, and it didn't, thank goodness. And then the reconstruction could begin. And at this point, my nose has lost its septum, looked fairly normal until they radiated it, and then it kind of collapsed and looked like a monkey nose. And in order to start making it look more like a nose, they had to put cartilage in it, which is what they did first. It looked pretty good until about a year later, it developed an infection. And much like women with breast cancer, with reconstruction, the way that the cells have been impacted caused the infection to be impossible almost to control. So I lost that first nose that they built to an infection. And after giving myself IV antibiotics for 4 months, they finally got the infection under control. And I was referred to a surgeon in Chicago who wrote all the books on nose reconstruction. He was the most highly regarded surgeon in the world, and he took on my case. And after about 30 attempts to reconstruct my nose with the most famous surgeon in the world, that included using rib tips, almost all my rib tips, 2 different arteries, took arteries out of my body and rooted them through my face, 5 forehead flaps, which I'm not sure that anybody's ever had that many. That I was leading the world, and last time I knew about that. And when I ran out of body parts is when, and he was in his mid 80s at this time. The last failure, I just didn't have any more body parts to contribute. So that I was left with then getting a prosthetic nose, which had been my biggest nightmare. And it was now 9 years of fighting this cancer, and almost 40 surgeries, all failed. Big, long surgeries, and about $250,000 out of pocket, because while women who have breast cancer are covered under the women's cancer law, I found out, which I didn't even know about, but evidently because it's very specific to breast cancer, and nose cancer it's not covered. So it was still, everything I did was all considered cosmetic, even though I didn't have a nose, which still shocks me.
Me too. I can't. That is so weird that they would replace a breast and not replace a nose. That just floors me. That floors me.
Yes. The good news is, with my diagnosis, bad news for me, but good news for the future, is that the exciting work that they've done with stem cells. A plastic surgeon that I've worked with since the prosthetic, just in trying to address all the damage from the radiation on my face, they are pioneering stem cell fat grafting, where they take your fat out of your stomach and spin it around and put it in wherever they put it in your body. It repairs cells at a microvascular level and adapts the DNA of where they've put it. And so had that been available back when I was starting my reconstruction surgeries, there's a chance that those reconstructions would have been more successful. So that's exciting for the future.
Yes.
For breast cancer.
Yes. How do you, I did not know that the journey was 9 years. How do you not sit and ask, why me? How do you not sit and ask, can I get a break? You see everybody, social media, I think it's a blessing and a curse. I think everybody puts their Kodak moments up there, and, we have a tendency to compare ourselves to the Kodak moments. And, you see people living this life, and here you are in the battle for your life, where it's something that's physical. Like, you can't even hide underneath a shirt or a scarf or something. And you've always had such a great attitude. What do you attribute that to?
Well, a couple things. I think back to what we were talking about earlier about the trauma, and without really realizing it, um, my my employer, Elkhart Schools, which is where I was special ed director, was amazing with me in terms of understanding what I was going to go through. I had a very visible job. I mean, we provided services for 2,500 kids and their families, and it's out and about in the community a lot. And really, what became my mode of operation, just because that I think it's because being a survivor is what it was all about, is that I didn't stay in my house. I went to work. I would go to drive 3 hours for the radiation, come home and work every day, because I wasn't in a lot of pain. And so I was out there visible during this whole process. The days I did stay in Indianapolis with my brother, I had a cubicle at the Department of Education in Indianapolis, and I was with people every day, and I think I became surrounded by people in our community, embraced by people at work, and accepted. And I think that while I couldn't look at myself in the mirror, I was expecting other people to look at me. But I think that that's the fact that I remained normal. My routine went on, and I wasn't at home in my basement, looking at my face every day, feeling sorry for myself. The why me? I read a quote early on in the cancer, that a man whose wife had many kinds of cancer, and somebody asked him after she'd passed away, didn't your wife ever wonder why me? And he said, no, she used to say, why not me? Who do I know that would be better to go through this? And that helped me a lot, because when I started having a pity party for myself, I would say, well, okay, think of who you think would be a better candidate for this. And so being surrounded by people in the community made me maybe more vulnerable in some ways, because people saw it. But I think I've told you about this, but at the end of the decade, when I had the prosthetic nose, I was turning 60, and I wanted to say goodbye to the worst decade of my life. So I threw a birthday party for myself, and invited people, and said on the birthday invitation, this is my gratitude party for all of I invited you because you're an angel. You've been somebody that supported me. And for everyone who comes, I'm going to donate $50 to our local cancer resources. And about 150 people came to my birthday party, and we flew in my doctors, all of them, and my prosthetic nose maker to attend my birthday party. And it was my way of saying thank you to them. But and to all of the people who continued to do things for 10 years, sending me flowers and cards and gym memberships and you name it. But as the party was over and the doctors were walking out to go back to their planes, the cancer doctor that followed me the longest said to me, it's really clear why you did so well. Look at the support you had or still do. And so I would say that's why I did well. I have to give you an infomercial, though, because many people have heard me say, through this, I had all you angels, but why did nobody ever nominate me for Hello Gorgeous? I mean, there was a day
they're ever going to live that down. They're never going to live that down.
I wrote Oprah Winfrey. I mean, I was the kind of person that so desperately needed what you provide. And I'm so glad to have learned about you. And yeah, I did okay, but it sure would have been nice to have had that. So anyway.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today, Mary Jo. And thank you for the big shout out about Hello Gorgeous. And thank you for sharing your story, because I know it's going to inspire people. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim, and very much. I appreciate it.
If you have any questions or comments, would like to know more about the guests on our show, or for more information about Hello Gorgeous, feel free to contact me at kbecker@hellogorgeous.org, or visit our website at www.hellogorgeous.org. We invite you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and download our mobile app. Thank you for joining me today on Hello Gorgeous, everything beauty, cancer, and inspiration. I'm your host, Kim Becker. And until next time, stay gorgeous.
Another beautiful day, walking in the sunshine, spending the time with you. Last night we had a good time, dancing in the moonlight and loving the night away. I can't imagine what it'd be like. I can't imagine what it'd be like. I can't imagine what it'd be like without you. I can't imagine that. I remember